Bonjour, this is Jasmine. Thank you guys so much for stopping to smell the roses on Rue Madame. For those of you who are new to the neighborhood, I am a writer, a storyteller, and a community builder. I write about culture, politics, parenthood, and my life here in France. So today we're going to be talking about social work, mental health, and what that means to us and for us during this time. Help me welcome Brittany. She is a social worker and she's very well educated on the subject, obviously. So help me welcome her so we can chat about this very important topic. First of all, I want to talk about your post. And your post, I'll read it. Reevaluating who is worth and worthy of my time, affection, and energy. I can relate. As a social worker, I spend so much time helping others, but no one really helps the social worker. We got stuff too. We just don't tell y'all, and y'all never bother to ask. Hashtag Happy Social Work Month. So, what made you write that post?
So, like in social work practice, we're always the person that someone runs to have a talk, right? We're always the one giving advice. We're always the one that is trying to make sure that other people resolve their challenges. But rarely anybody asks us, like, how are you doing? How are things going with you? And it gets very, very frustrating and it gets very tiresome because it's almost like we are filling everyone else's bucket, but then no one is filling ours just to make sure that our mental health is okay. And I felt like it was very important that I put that out there saying like, we have stuff too. We help a lot of people overcome their challenges and deal with the stuff that's going on in their lives. And a lot of the times we shoulder that. So if someone is dealing with family issues, we take that upon ourselves to try and figure out how can we make their life better? How can we make their situation better? But realistically, having similar challenges ourselves. We may be having trouble with making bills or having family issues, but no one really ever asks us like, how are you doing? Is there anything that I can help you with? And I felt like at that point, I had worked a really long day. I had helped a whole bunch of clients, and I was like, what? I'm getting really tired. Is anyone going to like ask me like, how am I doing? Um,
And how
and
are you doing? Just
you know what? Taking it a day at a time. I in a full disclosure, I am a cancer survivor, so I've been dealing with like all of that and what that feels like and looks like, as well as being like a mom. I co-parent with my son's father, but most of the time my son's with me, so like I shoulder a lot of that. Um, as well as being part of my uncle's preparing to pass. So like I am the person that's making all of the decisions. So I have a lot going on. And no one really ever asks me like, how are you doing? How are you holding up? So I appreciate you asking me, how am I doing?
yeah, when you're talking about your son, I have two small children myself, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And fortunately, I don't have to go out and help other people. I only have my own family to worry about. So I can only imagine that extra layer of stress of other people already on your life. As far as parenting during a pandemic and being a social worker with other people's problem, like has it doubled or tripled your load during this crazy?
Yes. I mean, everyone right now is dealing with anxiety for one. They're dealing with the ideas and the understanding that like family that you don't get to see, your friends that you don't get to see because of the social distancing and what that feels like, because as humans we crave that interaction between one another. We like to feel and touch and be in the presence of others, and having to separate yourself from them causes like isolation, and we're not used to that. Even the most antisocial person still craves a little bit of interaction.
Right.
um just to feed themselves. So I have seen a drastic amount of that. And normally we see like seasonal depression. So we saw that elevate over this period of
Okay.
not only having, seasonal depression that is like common with a lot of people, but having that heightened by the fact that even if I wanted to see somebody, there's all these stipulations put in place as to why I can't see them. So the load has been a lot heavier. I've seen more people seek therapy over the last year than I had in previous years, just because of not being able to see and be in the presence of family and friends.
Right, right.
Um, and a lot of the times in practice, I even volunteer with organizations of doing some pro bono work, of just being a resource to people who cannot naturally afford
Oh, yes, yes,
therapy.
yes.
So my load has definitely heightened over this past year.
Do you social work via technology? Like, do you do online
Yes,
video
everything
sessions?
is virtual now, so I
Oh,
spend
okay.
so much time over the computer, that on top of me doing like my regular job, I come home and then I'm doing social work practice afterwards. So a lot of it is um, online. A lot of it is also through telemarketing. So like
Oh,
people will call like a phone number and it will reroute you to a social worker,
okay.
as well. A lot of the times I do work with military families because my son's father is in the service. So I like to really dedicate a lot of time to military families. So I'm part of a network that primarily works with like military families who are having challenges, already being deployed and being separated from family,
Yeah.
and making sure that they have the support they need as well.
Okay. And I saw a later post, and you said there's an old saying that goes, if you're a therapist that doesn't have a therapist,
Get
get
you a
a
new therapist. Yes, I am a big person on that. Even as a social worker, I have a social worker. It's really important that in social work practice, we are still nurturing ourselves. We are still making sure that we're taking care of our mental health. Like I was saying earlier, like we have to be cognizant of who we're giving our time and energy to, because we get mentally and emotionally drained as well. So we need to also have an outlet as well. So if your social worker does not have someone that they're having an outlet for who can professionally guide them to work through some of the secondary trauma that they're receiving from having to work with clients, um, then you need to find me someone else, because they're not working through their own stuff. We all have stuff and we all need to acknowledge that. So it's really important that in social work practice, we have someone to share our thoughts and feelings and just like decompress, because we definitely don't want to bring our stuff into our clients' problems and put and make it more about us than it is what they're going through.
Right. So social work, psychologists, psychiatrists. Growing up, I studied a bit of that. I went to school for physical therapy, so I went into like brushed on some some of the differences. But for the audience who don't know the differences between the two, can you explain a little bit about?
Yeah, so social workers, we do not prescribe medications. One of the biggest differences between a psychiatrist and a social worker. We provide tools that are necessary to cope with some of the challenges that people face and find resources for them. We can also even provide go through our DSM, which is like our diagnostic book, to
Okay.
identify whether someone may be exhibiting a diagnosis for ADHD or post-traumatic stress or things of that nature. We can actually go through and like say, I think that you may have this based on what the criteria is. And then we could refer to a psychiatrist to provide the medication for that, as well as seeking out their primary physician. Psychologists are very similar to social workers, except that psychologists typically go a little bit deeper into the mind of understanding like real deep psychological causes, where social workers will say, okay, psychologist has said that you have some deep rooted issues with like family, and really understanding what that means, right? So we can fix coping mechanisms of how you actually work with family. What does that look like for you? And figuring out coping strategies for that. Psychiatrists will also prescribe medications, but they also do very similar things as psychologists of really like doing deep internal thinking kind of
Okay.
process.
So, do you have like a chair in the office where it's
Actually, I don't. I found that, people do not really like that. It feels
okay?
very like stereotypical and very like not it's sometimes intimidating. That
Hmm.
I want when people come and talk with me, I want it to seem like a conversation where it's just like us having a dialogue about what's going on in their life rather than them feeling like I'm analyzing them and like really deep diving into things. While we do that, I don't want it to feel daunting for them. I want it to feel as though I'm they're more so talking to a friend who happens to be working through their challenges with them. It's
Okay.
supposed to be a partnership rather than someone telling me you have this problem. I need you to actually tell me what you feel your problem is, and then I will help you work through that.
Okay. And I don't know if it's recent, but in the past couple years, I've heard a push for the Black community, especially to seek psychiatry, social work, etc. I'm sure last year with all the um, protests and the police incidences, etc. Have you noticed more of an accepting of mental health care in your clients, for example?
So when it comes to the Black community and mental health, we've always been like, it's always been ingrained in like us, like we don't do therapy, like we work stuff out on our own. But I have been seeing more and more that individuals are understanding the purpose of therapy. It is not like something is wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you if you're seeking therapy. Actually, it's a really good thing when I see individuals who are in underrepresented populations going to actually seek therapy because they're really understanding like I have some things that I can't figure out on my own and I need help working through them. I have seen over the last year with all the unrest that has been going on with some of the injustices that have been happening is that more Black individuals, Black and Brown individuals have been going and seeking out therapy and seeking out counseling just to be able to work through some of that trauma and those emotions that we have been feeling, as well as those within the mental health fields offering more pro bono services based on the fact that so much has been happening that has caused unrest. Um, I personally like always try and refer individuals who are Black and Brown to individuals who look like them, only because they can kind of have some of that disclosure of saying, I understand how you feel, and it really being heartfelt. Not to say that those who are not part of the same population providing services cannot do that. It's just a different level of connection. And I feel as though those that look like you can have a more in-depth and raw conversation. So I've seen it more over the past couple of years with the unrest.
Curious, through your training or in your schooling, did they ever tap into that specific niche of someone looking like you and having that connection, or was that something that wasn't? Okay.
No, it is not. It's not. It's not a common thing in social work. They don't necessarily say, "Oh, well, with this population, we're going to talk about Black and Brown individuals and how social work practice is conducted that way." It's normally something that you learn over time. Um, in social work. And sometimes if I'm being honest, there's a lot of stuff that we learn that may not necessarily be applicable to certain populations based on the culture. And that's something that social work is still working. And I think in all mental health fields, actually, it's still working to kind of understand that some of the baseline things that we're taught work, but then some things do not work because it's not applicable based on the culture of certain populations.
Okay. And I don't know if you've seen different shows that touch on this specific topic. For example, Taraji P. Henson has a show on mental health, and I'm like into it. Do you find those things like helpful to like give people an example of like, this is how simple it is to like just chat and, talk about trauma without it being a very traumatic or,
Yeah.
stigmatizing thing.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I love seeing when other people of color are having, shows or podcasts or things like that to really talk about mental health. Um, because it gives us an opportunity to see things from a different light, as well as seeing representation out there. Representation is everything for us. We want to see more of people who look like us doing practices or doing whatever that may interest us or may be able to help us. For example, I recently watched Read Between the Lines. It had Tracy Ellis Ross in it,
Okay.
and she was a psychologist in it. And I just loved the show because like there was an episode where she was trying to cope with some of her trauma of dealing with, give me one second. But I really love the representation of Read Between the Lines, and having her character had an episode where um, it was about cheating in the Black community, and she was married before, and her ex-husband had cheated on her, and she actually brought that stuff into one of her sessions because she had a client who was doing the same thing and brought his girlfriend in, but he was married. So just seeing how that played out and seeing that representation of how she didn't resolve those challenges with how she felt about her ex-husband cheating, and it was brought into the space, is the reason why my post was like how it was, of saying we need to talk about those things, because if we're bringing that in, we're not helping our clients resolve the things that they came in for. We may not always agree, but it's really important that we're not bringing our stuff into it. So that's the reason why we need outlets, and seeing something like that portrayed on a show and realizing that in the Black community that is something that comes up, and we need to resolve those things in mental health practice before we help others, was really important. So I love seeing representation like that on TV shows.
Just one more example of representation, because the first thing I think of as far as like movies or popular culture is the scene in Precious where Mariah Carey, I believe she was the
Yeah.
she was the social worker. So like it gives you images of different examples of care that you can get that's not necessarily so superficial, like we were talking about the chair. Like when in that scene, she was just talking about their everyday life and what she can do with her family and her mom and stuff like that, that didn't require you to be like in a hospital or clinic setting.
Mm-hmm.
So it opens your eyes, like, it's not just one thing. And I just have a one question for like, if you don't have any problems or you aren't necessarily like feeling sad or depressed or whatever, do you think it's a good idea to have like a psychologist, social worker anyway, just to have it, or do you think it's unnecessary, just
So I guess the question is asking, like, if you don't feel like you have any problems, should you still have a social worker
right?
or a therapist or some sort? A lot of the times we feel like we don't ever have problems, right? Like we're managing just fine. And if you feel that way, fine, cool. But just also keep in mind that, like, if you need it, seek it. And it's okay if you don't have one right then, but realizing like if there is a time where you may need it, being open and being aware of where your boundaries are, and if you've hit a wall and feel like you really need to talk with someone, not feeling ashamed or feeling weird about needing the help. I think that's a big thing of within the Black community, Black and Brown community, is like we don't want to be seen as weak. And seeking therapy can also be equated to being that, or feeling that way. And it's really a sign of strength, of being able to say, I have some things that I need to work through. I don't need it all the time, but right now I know that I do, because I'm dealing with something and I don't know how I feel about it, but I need to figure it out.
I also think it's a part of you just being a lot of people, especially in our community, just being ignorant. Like if you're never exposed to something, like some people don't even know the resources are there at their disposal. So you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like some people are exposed to, different activities that you're like, oh, I never, even thought about even doing that. Or some people may need it, but they don't realize they need it. Somebody has to tell them, like, you know what, you probably, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just need an outside source to like nudge them.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes we do need that. Sometimes we do need someone to say, you know what, you might need to talk with somebody. A lot of the times we joke about that when we tell our friends, be like, you know, you need to talk to somebody about that. And I don't think that we really take that as strongly as we
Seriously,
should.
right.
Like we think that our friend is just, saying that, but realistically, they may be on to something. um,
It reminds me of that Issa Rae Insecure episode
yes.
where Molly just, needed, but she was so in denial that
Mhm.
she couldn't, accept the fact that she needed.
Yeah, but I think that that happens with a lot of women in professional settings because we want to feel like we have it all together. We don't want anyone to see us sweat. I am one of those people that sometimes is like, I don't want anyone to know that I have problems. I don't want anyone to see me sweat. But that also takes a bit of the human away from what people see in me. I always say people have three faces. They have the face that they put on that they want people to see. And then there's the face that people who just know you see because that's their interpretation of you. But right there in the middle, there's the real face that you never show anyone. And it's pieces of you that you don't even know about
Right.
that you
Right.
still need to figure out because those are the ones that are pushed really, really down deep. And you're just like, they're the worst parts of me. I'm never showing anybody this, but they're there and we never really work through them. So it's really important that when, we really listen to what our friends are really saying to us, because they may be really coming from the heart with saying you do need some help, but they're saying it in a jokingly way. And maybe we need to do some reflection on that.
Yeah. Okay, I don't want to keep you too long. I know your son just woke up. I just have one more question, because it is also Women's History Month,
Mhm.
and I just thought it was weird, like it's the same month as Social Work Month, so I thought that was great. So I'm happy that I get to talk to you. Are most of your clients women, and do you see a difference in the men and women seeking social work help?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The number of men opposed to women really seeking therapy is quite small. More women will seek therapy than men would. And even if you break it down into cultures and races and ethnicities, it's even more of a drastic difference, especially speaking of Black and Brown communities. Black men, brown men, they don't really want to seek therapy. They have it in their heads, and what's ingrained in our culture,
In our
very rooted,
culture, yeah.
is that men need to be strong, men don't cry,
They were the
men need to
alphas.
yeah,
Right.
you hold everything in and you make it work, right? But that's not benefiting our men because when they grow up to be husbands and fathers, they don't know how to connect with individuals because they've been told not to show any emotions and not to talk about certain things. So we do see more women coming in and talking about their challenges and their issues. I mean, think about when you hear like relationships, they have this saying where like if there's a problem in your relationship, the men won't say anything, but the woman is always vocal when there's a problem, right? And there's only a problem if the woman says something. There's never
Right,
a
right,
problem if
right,
the
right.
man says anything. And we really need to like get out of that and making sure that our young men feel comfortable with seeking therapy and knowing that that is a sign of strength. It is not a sign of weakness. It is not a sign of inferiority at all. That is an outlet for them, and it is giving them the ability to become a better self,
Right.
um, and making sure that they feel wanted and needed in those spaces as well. Um, but I also think that some of that also comes from the low number of men that are actually social workers or psychologists or
Oh,
psychiatrists.
right, right.
Um, I mean, very similar to, finding someone who looks like you, who has very similar experiences, of feeling more comfortable having conversations like this. But when you don't have someone of the same sex as you as well,
It
it
makes
makes
a
it a lot
difference.
more difficult to have those conversations. So we also don't see young men and men come in for therapy because they're talking to a woman, and that can be
Yes.
quite awkward for them. So,
I think it's similar between men being teachers. You don't have a lot of men teachers, so you
mhm,
have a lot of young Black boys, for example, who aren't interested in what they're learning. So that can be attributed to the mental health sector as well. It's
mhm,
quite interesting. And as we were talking, it made me think about this conversation being really good for parents because we're both parents, obviously, but um, what we can instill in our children, like in my son, for example, where in the future he won't feel like he has to repeat the same stereotypical cliche role, gender roles where, oh, okay,
mhm.
I'm strong and I don't need. So I think it's important for mothers and fathers to talk about mental health with their kids and start early because I think
Yeah.
that will break the cycle.
Yeah, I think it's really important that as we're bringing up our kids, that we're telling them it's okay for you to cry. If you're a boy, it's okay for you to cry. If you're a girl, it's okay for you to, have different ideas of what being a girl means to you, because it could look different and it's nothing to be upset about. It's okay for, boys to share their emotions of when they're upset, but knowing how to do it in the right way, in a constructive way, is important. So it really does start with like our childhood, and a lot of parents, like you said, they don't really know what resources, and they've been taught one way, and then embracing a new way is really hard for them. And being able to like break that cycle of that consistent conversation of like, we need to be strong all the time, um, is something that we all need to work on. It's something that we
Right.
should be having more conversations about.
It's like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym once. You go to the gym on a regular basis, and I think we should apply that to our mental health. It's not just, oh, I'm fine all the time. You have to just check in. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think
um,
it's really important for us to do check-ins. I mean, do check-ins with yourself, write down affirmations, write down like how you may be feeling. Journaling, bullet journaling is
Journaling.
a
Oh my god.
really good way for us to do that. If you're not interested in seeking therapy, or you're not at a point where you feel like you really need therapy and you're still trying to figure out if it's something you want, get a journal and just write down your feelings, because it's better if you write it out on paper and get it off your chest than for you to hold it in and not say anything at all.
Is there websites or places we can go to to seek? Okay, where do I find a social worker? Where do I Where would you suggest people look?
So a good place to look for social workers would be like right in your own in your own state, like government. So like right now I have on my NASW. So that's the National Social Work Association.
Oh, okay.
You can go right on the NASW website, and you'll be able to find a whole bunch of resources, including like a list of social workers that you can separate out by your state. And then from there, there's also, my friend utilizes a website called Black Social Workers Rock.
Okay.
Um, and she uses that for mental health as well, and they have a whole bunch of therapists and social workers that are on that website that you can connect with as well. Um,
That's
but
great.
those are two really great places for you to start, because the NASW will give you a lot of resources just on like what's happening in social work, how to get in contact with them, as well as resources for how to get in contact with social workers. And then Black Social Workers Rock is like a site where you can actually find social workers that may be in your area that are of within the Black and Brown community.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, Brittany. I've learned a lot. Hopefully, the audience has learned a lot too. Thank you so much. And hopefully, we can talk again about future and check in.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Anytime.
thank you
Any,
so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
you too.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.